If you were a young child living in New York City back in the 1920s who couldn't read a calendar yet, there was a way you could tell for sure that the Christmas season had arrived. Starting in 1924, the fabulous Macy's department store on Herald Square in New York presented a magnificent parade down 34th Street on Thanksgiving Day morning every year to kick off the Christmas season. For that first parade, 250,000 observers watched employees march down 34th Street to the front of Macy's, dressed as clowns, cowboys, and medieval knights. They were accompanied by 4 professional brass bands and live animals, including elephants, bears, camels, and monkeys, borrowed from the Central Park Zoo. Every year for the weeks leading up to Christmas, Macy's huge window displays featured elaborate themed dioramas, often including moving objects such as trains and marionettes. In 1924, nursery rhymes were the window theme, so the first parade featured floats depicting Mother Goose favorites like Little Miss Muffet. At the end of that first parade came the highlight of the day, Santa Claus on his own icy float. When he arrived at the Macy's front door, he climbed down from his float and climbed up a huge ladder to get to the top of the marquee above the store entrance, where a golden throne was waiting for him. He was crowned King of the Kiddies, and then blew a loud blast on a trumpet, the signal to unveil the fabulous Macy's Christmas window display. The police lowered their crowd control lines, and masses of children rushed to the 75-foot-long window where Mother Goose marionettes, on moving belts, frolicked in their own parade in front of a castle. That first parade in 1924 was such a rousing success that Macy's made it an annual affair. Yes, little New Yorkers, with their older siblings and parents and grandparents, could be sure when Christmas time was starting every year once they'd watched the fabulous Macy's parade and welcomed Santa Claus at the end. Very quickly, the parade organizers realized that spicing up all the old-timey nursery rhyme characters with characters from modern pop culture was a good idea. In 1927, they introduced Felix the Cat as the first large character balloon, the forerunner of many to come. By 1934, the spectacle was getting more and more fabulous as the balloons were getting bigger and bigger, such as this Mickey Mouse from 1934. By the early 1930s, 1 million people were lined up for the parade, and the crowds continued growing every year. People outside of New York got a tiny glimpse of the New York excitement in 1947, when the movie Miracle on 34th Street featured glimpses of the parade, such as this patriotic float from the movie, and this arrival of Santa from the movie. But I was born in 1946 and too young to see that movie when it was in theaters. So the Macy's parade and its Santa, as a harbinger of the official arrival of the Christmas season, didn't work for me. Well, at least not until my family got our first TV set in 1952. Starting in 1948, the parade was broadcast across the nation on television. So by the time Thanksgiving rolled around, when I was in first grade in 1952, I was able to take it all in myself, including the more and more elaborate giant character balloons. And from then on, like millions of other children in New York City and across the nation had been doing for years, I began looking forward to the Macy's parade year by year, with the Macy's Santa making his grand entrance at the end as the proof that the Christmas season was upon us. Well, then again, there has long been one other signal that the Christmas season has begun, even for those kids before the 1950s who couldn't go to New York, and for those in the 1950s and after whose families didn't have a Thanksgiving morning tradition of watching the Macy's parade on TV. Because Santa didn't just show up at Macy's department store in New York City. All across America, from clear back in the 1800s, local department stores have hosted their own cheery, warm, friendly versions of the jolly old elf to delight the kiddies and start the season of good cheer. Yes, when Santa showed up for souvenir photo ops with the kiddies at your own local department store, you knew that the holly jolly Christmas season had begun. Yes, I'm sure that for many Americans, the assurance that the Christmas season has arrived every year comes when they enjoy watching the fun parade of gigantic balloons in the Macy's parade while waiting for the Thanksgiving turkey to finish roasting, culminating in the fancifully decorated float bearing the latest incarnation of Santa Claus, ho-ho-hoing everyone into imbibing the Christmas spirit. And if they miss the parade, they can always take the kiddies in the household down to the local department store to get selfies taken with one of the Santa clones there. But unless you have been living under a rock for the last 16 years, you are likely aware that our modern world has an even more dependable way to know the Christmas season has officially arrived. It was introduced to the nation on December 4th, 2004, to open the Christmas season that year. Just exactly like that original Macy's parade, it was such a smashing success its first year that it was recycled the next year and has continued right on to today.
Well, the war on Christmas is not real. They tell you it all the time. It's totally fake. And if you believe in it, you're dumb. You watch Fox News or something.
Isn't it amazing, the attack, the assault? It's just unbridled and seemingly unprecedented against Christmas.
It has to do with, at the root of it, it has to do with two things: abortion and the gay rights agenda.
You know, today we're talking a lot about sexual harassment. Well, cases like this are examples of spiritual harassment. And look, this is a part of the larger, not just war on Christmas, but the war against Christianity.
Look, I'm tired of we're going to talk about this all the way through Christmas.
Can you name one person who's said that Obama's waging a war on Christmas?
I've heard many people on these airwaves talking about it. I've been on panels talking about. Is this really happening?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't said it. I don't remember anybody saying that Obama's waging a war on Christmas.
Who's war on Christmas?
Obama's.
I think we won the war on terror. I mean, the war on Christmas already.
Hostile toward Christmas and hostile toward Christians.
The war on Christmas heads to Sin City.
Because there wasn't anybody else fighting this war on Christmas. I'll take kudos for that.
War on Christmas. And John, you've got a book by that title.
Yeah, I did write a book about it, and I thought maybe we'd be done with it.
And the war on Christmas may be worse than ever.
There is an attack on Christmas, which is kind of the tip of the spear when it comes to an even greater battle brewing.
They mock the idea there is a war on Christmas even as they wage it.
It's like the secret bombing of Cambodia. It was a secret from everybody except the people getting bombed. Same deal here.
A new front in the war on Christmas.
Long Island, New York is ground zero for this year's first battle in the war on Christmas.
But not just in America. The war on Christmas is a global struggle.
The PC police firing off their first shot in this year's war on Christmas.
We wish you a happy holiday. We wish you a happy holiday.
Jesus is the reason for the season.
And more victims in the war on Christmas.
Attacks on Christmas.
The war on Christmas doesn't exist. Obviously, you know that. You'd have to be a moron or some kind of Fox News viewer to think there's a war on Christmas.
To deny that there is a war on Christmas is to lie.
And it's a new battle in the war on Christmas. Why your ugly sweater party just got canceled by cancel culture.
There's a problem. The cops don't say Christmas. They say, Merry Coffee.
Big headlines for you. War on Christmas edition.
Waging a war on Christmas.
War on Christmas.
There's a war on Christmas.
It's the war on Christmas.
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 It's a new chapter in the left's war on Christmas.
Assaults on the traditions of Christmas.
In North Korea to the war on Christmas.
Dr. Sebastian Gorka says this has jihad written all over it. He is live next.
And the war on Christmas.
If you watch The Factor, you know that we won the war on Christmas battle. And we'll be back in a moment.
Yes, the War on Christmas segments on the Fox News Channel have become an American Christmas season institution for 16 years now. Usually, right near the beginning of December, the Fox pundits begin gathering to announce that, just like the never-ending war in Afghanistan, the war on Christmas is still raging, and to discuss reports of the conflict from the front lines. This has been going on for so long now that the average American knows nothing about when and how it all began. Let me give you a brief Fox history lesson from a December 23, 2019 article I found on the MediaMatters.org website titled, A War on Christmas Story, How Fox News Built the Dumbest Part of America's Culture War. Here are glimpses of just a few examples from the endless war reports from the Fox crowd, as cataloged by the Media Matters article. On December 3, 2004, Fox News' now defunct The O'Reilly Factor TV show debuted a recurring segment called Christmas Under Siege. Though Christmas was not and has never been under siege in any meaningful way, disgraced former host Bill O'Reilly and Fox were set on pushing this victimization narrative, laying the groundwork for what soon became known as the War on Christmas. In the 15 years since, onlookers watched the very concept of objective reality fracture along political lines. Consumers of conservative media drifted ever deeper into a world where a school's non-existent ban on red and green clothing became national news, and paranoid delusions were freely floated about a future in which people may be prohibited from displaying Christmas decorations. 2005. O'Reilly promises to use all the power he has on radio and television to bring horror into the world of people who diminish and denigrate the Christmas holiday. He baselessly suggests that former Democratic presidential candidate John Kerry would have abolished Christmas as a federal holiday had he won the 2004 election, replacing it with winter solstice or something. The Fox host falsely claims that the U.S. Postal Service no longer offers stamps with a spiritual theme. In October 2005, Fox News anchor John Gibson publishes a book titled The War on Christmas: How the Liberal Plot to Ban the Sacred Christian Holiday is Worse Than You Thought. It envisions a vast conspiracy with tentacles reaching into many aspects of American life. Gibson declares in the book, "The plot to ban Christmas itself is anything but secret. It is embedded in the Secular Humanist Manifesto, in its 3 iterations from the American Humanists Association, in the philosophy of teaching of John Dewey, in the legal opinions of Lawrence Tribe, in the rulings of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, on which sits the most liberal jurist in the land, Stephen Reinhardt, who is married to Ramona Ripston, the Southern California ACLU executive director and the national group's most liberal and effective leader. The Christians are coming to retake their place in the public square, and the most natural battleground in this war is Christmas." In 2009, anti-Muslim bigot Pam Geller says that the Senate holding a vote on Christmas Eve is an act of treason and blasphemy. I'm guessing, of course, that the real source of Geller's ire was what the vote was about that year. The Obamacare Act was passed by the Senate on December 24, 2009. And about that Christmas Eve blasphemy, I'm sure when most people hear the term Christmas Eve, they think of the evening and nighttime just before December 25th. So this sounded like the senators were in their chambers voting in the abominable Obamacare Act at the exact same time most people were gathering around their Christmas trees and singing carols or something. But this doesn't take into account that the technical calendar meaning of the term Christmas Eve refers to the whole 24-hour period of December 24, before the beginning of the 25th. The whole 24 hours of December 24th is actually Christmas Eve Day. Yes, the vote was taken early in the morning around 8 a.m. on the day before Christmas. Although, of course, what holding a vote such as this would have to do with treason, even if it was held at 8 p.m., is totally ridiculous. Much less whatever Geller meant by her use of the term blasphemy. And so, 5 years into Bill O'Reilly's reports on the war over Christmas, the drum beats still continued. In 2010, Fox and Friends claims that the city of Tulsa's decision to host a holiday parade instead of a Christmas parade is a topic of national controversy. Fox and Friends pushes a bogus story about a Central Florida school banning traditional Christmas colors. National Review writer Jay Nordlinger lies about a lack of Christmas greeting cards. Fox's website accuses the National Basketball Association of attacking Christmas by scheduling games on the holiday, seemingly oblivious to this long-standing tradition. Longstanding is right. Catch this. The first Christmas Day NBA game was held on December 25th, 1947, in the NBA's second season, and games on that day have been an annual tradition since then. For example, the very first showdown featuring basketball stars Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal as opponents occurred on Christmas 2004. 2009 and 2010 featured face-offs between LeBron James and Kobe Bryant. From 2008 to 2011, teams playing on Christmas Day wore a patch featuring the NBA logo inside a snowflake. And between 2012 and 2016, the NBA and Adidas produced special uniforms for the Christmas games. And you can even get your own commemorative Christmas Day patch for only $12.95. In spite of those inconvenient facts, Fox was right back at it the next year. In 2011, then Fox host Gretchen Carlson suggests that debate moderators ask 2012 presidential candidates, how important would it be for you to address the political correctness in our society, including the war on Christmas? And warns, maybe Christmas won't be a federal holiday coming up if it continues down this path. Carlson speculates that it may soon be illegal for her to display Christmas decorations in her home. Also 2011, then Fox host Eric Bolling implies Obama favors Islam over Christianity, while a sign in the background says Obama's war on Christmas. O'Reilly devotes more time to the war on Christmas than he does to actual wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. In 2012, Fox and Friends interviews a professional Santa about Christmas being under attack. He's unhappy because people don't hire him for parties if they call them holiday parties instead of Christmas parties. O'Reilly agrees with the guest who says that the war on Christmas is the left's attempt to advance abortion and gay rights because Christianity is against those things. Frequent Fox guest Ben Stein, who is Jewish, claims that people who don't like Christmas are mentally ill. 2013, O'Reilly again says secular progressives want to ban Christmas to achieve policy goals including unfettered abortion and gay marriage. Then Fox host Megyn Kelly tells her audience that Jesus and Santa are both white, and O'Reilly backs her on his show. Fox's Tucker Carlson warns during a War on Christmas segment that not believing in God leads to killing a ton of people. 2013 also, during the Veterans Day episode of his show in mid-November before Thanksgiving, Hannity devotes twice as much time to the war on Christmas as to veterans of actual wars, because he's interviewing Sarah Palin about her new book about the war on Christmas. 2015, Fox and Friends first claimed Starbucks is trying to bah humbug Christmas by going with a more minimal red design rather than Christmas images for its annual holiday cup. In spite of the little brouhaha over the Starbucks cups in 2015, after a whole decade of ranting about the non-existent war, Fox really had seemed to have been dialing down its war rhetoric a bit, insisting occasionally even that the war was almost won by the good guys. And then, out of nowhere, the war heated up again. Why?
Ho, ho, ho!
I will tell you, I'm a good Christian. Okay, remember that. And I told you about Christmas, and I guarantee if I become president, we're going to be saying Merry Christmas at every store. We're not going to be doing every store. Every store. The happy holiday, you can leave that over in the corner. Happy holiday, everybody. Enjoy it. But I'm saying Merry Christmas to whoever the hell wants to hear it.
Yes, as the Donald exclaimed in that famous speech, the happy holiday, you can leave that over in the corner. Happy holiday, everybody, enjoy it. But I'm saying Merry Christmas to whoever the hell wants to hear it. Although, of course, 2 months later, when he sent out his own personal Christmas cards for 2015, he must have decided that whoever the hell wanted to hear Happy Holidays, who might vote for him, needed to be sopped too. So here was the official 2015 Donald J. Trump Christmas card he sent out. Maybe every store would need to avoid Happy Holidays, but not Donald J. Trump Incorporated. I'm going to guess that Trump's evangelical support base was able to overlook that odd little discrepancy and go right back to believing that he and he alone was going to be able to do what they had wanted to do for decades: take back America and make it Christian again, like it was when it was great, starting with restoring Merry Christmas to its rightful place of honor. In August 2016, Eric Trump talked with conservative evangelical Christian leader James Robison about his dad's dedication to addressing concerns of the Christian conservative evangelicals in the U.S. He said that his dad opens up the paper each morning and sees that some new school district has just eliminated the ability for its students to say the Pledge of Allegiance, or some fire department in some town is ordered by the mayor to no longer fly the American flag on the back of a fire truck, or he sees a tree on the White House lawn has been renamed Holiday Tree instead of Christmas Tree. I could go on and on for hours. Those are the very things that made my father run, and those are the very things he cares about. Yes, only Donald Trump could fix all that. So he won the election and got busy on the promises he'd made to his Christian base, including a thank you Christmas tour before the end of the year, before he even took office. By mid-2017, the restoration of Christmas was well underway.
We are stopping cold the attacks on Judeo-Christian values. Thank you. Thank you very much. And something I said so much during the last 2 years, but I'll say it again as we approach the end of the year. You know, we're getting near that beautiful Christmas season that people don't talk about anymore. They don't use the word Christmas because it's not politically correct. You go to department stores and they'll say Happy New Year and they'll say other things and it'll be red. They'll have it painted, but they don't say, well, guess what? We're saying Merry Christmas again.
Yeah, Trump sure rescued Christmas from the neglect of Barack Obama. And you might say he brought back a classic white Christmas to the White House by the end of his first year in office in 2017. By Christmas 2017, by some accounts, he'd succeeded in delivering lots of his campaign promises, including the ones about Christmas. At least his loyal base seemed to think so. Or at least the actors in this Trump ad from that year who were posing as Trump supporters made it seem so.
Thank you, President Trump.
Thank you, President Trump.
Thank you.
Everyday Americans are standing up to thank President Trump.
Thank you so much,
for
sir.
making America great again.
Thank you for cutting my taxes. Thank you for fixing our economy.
Thank you for keeping my family safe.
Thank you for putting America first.
Thank you for supporting Israel.
As veterans, thank you for reminding us to stand for our national anthem.
Thank you, President Trump.
Thank you, President Trump, for letting us say Merry Christmas again.
But let's take a step back for a bit from 2017 and return to 2005. Just as O'Reilly was gearing up for his second year of reporting from the front lines of the war on Christmas, late-night comedians were gearing up their rebuttal. On December 7, 2005, The Daily Show aired its first segment of what quickly became its yearly coverage of the so-called war. "I'm your enemy. Make me your enemy," Jon Stewart announced, happily baiting O'Reilly after the Fox host attacked his show for being anti-Christmas. "I, Jon Stewart, hate Christmas, Christians, Jews, morality." Just to be clear, Stewart is Jewish. Stewart was joined in later years by other late-night hosts such as Stephen Colbert and Trevor Noah, who would mock Fox's efforts unmercifully each year. Fox's Christmas reporting was certainly easy for Stewart or Colbert or Noah to make fun of. There was never any real substance to the panicky Fox stories. Early on in their reporting on the so-called war, they would pick up an obscure little story from some obscure town out in the boonies somewhere that wasn't in the slightest representative of what was actually going on in the average city in America, and hype it as if it was a foreshadow of the Christmas police who'd soon be breaking down your door to your house to haul your Christmas tree away and put you in jail for singing carols. Yes, they could always find some place where local authorities weren't quite sure yet how to handle the idea of separation of church and state, so those authorities might err on the side of extremes. For instance, some local school administration might forbid kids from passing out Christmas cards at school, until sometimes the ACLU itself might intervene on behalf of the kids and insist that such policies were totally incorrect. But misunderstandings didn't make for hyped-up news stories, so there would never be any follow-up by Fox. They'd just rush on to the next silly anecdote. As the years went by, those actual stories about some situation involving the ACLU actually almost disappeared. They were reduced to complaining about some mundane situation, such as Starbucks not having suitable holiday cups, or perhaps complaining about some obscure discussion about the plot of the old 1964 stop-motion animated puppet TV special on Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. When a few liberals somewhere discussed the topic of bullying as it appeared in the Rudolph film, they were accused of being part of a growing movement, wanting to ban the film from the airwaves as part of an anti-Christmas plot. And all of this was touted as being part of the proof of a nefarious, concerted persecution of Christians and Christian holidays in America. You have to be totally blind to not have noticed that no matter what Fox has said over the years, enthusiasm for celebrating Christmas in America has never waned, and in the most flamboyant ways. In most parts of America, there has certainly been no lack of enthusiastic homeowners decking their homes with a lot more than boughs of holly these days, as you can see by this 2019 article. In some places, the situation has gotten so out of hand that the splendiferous Christmas light shows in some neighborhoods are literally interfering with airplane flights. Yes, in the minds of most liberals over the years since 2004, this whole war on Christmas thing was just utter goofiness. Christmas is everywhere in American society. Christmas sales account for a massive proportion of the annual budgets of many businesses. In every branch of capitalism, from Hallmark card shops to department stores to selling booze. And the commercialization of Christmas is not something that has recently been sneaked into society by the liberals of the 21st century. It's been at the center of the celebration for nearly 2 centuries now. It's not American atheists who downplayed Christ almost out of Christmas. It has always been American capitalists. Baby Jesus in the manger doesn't sell. Santa Claus and the obsession to give and get presents does. Clear back in 1874 in Los Angeles, That obsession was selling mass quantities of items such as diamonds and jewelry. In 1902, it was selling Christmas guns. In 1922, it was encouraging American men to buy a Christmas car for their family and themselves. The chant, "Buy, buy, buy," has competed at Christmas time with carols for a long, long time. In fact, American capitalism has never hesitated to use an endorsement from Santa himself to sell everything from fancy leather novelties to giant boxes of chewing gum, to household appliances such as toasters and waffle irons, to Lucky Strike cigarettes, to just about every brand of cigarette ever made. Santa didn't even pretend that somehow his smoking habit was endorsed by Jesus for Christmas. As you can see from this ad for Egyptian deities, Santa was totally okay with paganism all the way. Even the idea of pushing Christmas shopping earlier and earlier in the year didn't start with retailers setting up Christmas displays not long after Halloween, even before Thanksgiving, in recent decades. That trend started way back, and just like now, was started not by atheists but by capitalists wanting to sell more and more goods, as you can see from these ads from 1918 and 1922, urging Christmas shoppers to get out to the shops early. Every aspect of the narrative that Fox News has wanted to use to insist that there is some sort of modern war by liberals against Christmas celebration is based on utter nonsense and a total ignorance of the history of Christmas celebration in America. Yes, frankly, I always thought the whole thing was utterly ridiculous. I loved watching Stewart and the others skewer the nonsense of Tucker Carlson and Bill O'Reilly and all their jolly band of Fox comrades over their goofy claims. I thought that the Fox hosts and commentators were just silly, foolish people making a mountain out of a molehill to get higher ratings from their gullible audiences. And then I found out I was wrong. It began when I stumbled onto this article from 2015 on a website called Counterpunch, while I was looking for articles about how silly the Fox war was. And suddenly I tumbled down a rabbit hole that didn't take me where I expected to go. Complaints about Starbucks cups this October ushered us into the annual conservative panic about the war on Christmas. Fox News serves as a perennial megaphone blaming secular progressives for undermining Christian values as part of a grander scheme to lead the United States down the path of sin and collectivism. Liberal pundits respond to Fox's Christmas Under Siege segments by mocking conservatives and getting cheap laughs at the general silliness of it all. Few, however, have addressed or taken seriously the broader politics of which this phenomenon is a part. The war on Christmas is more than a tinfoil hat conspiracy theory. It is a gateway into a conservative politics that exalts capitalism, racism, and nativism while attacking the left. Say what? Racism and nativism? What on earth was that all about? Here is what that was all about. The first reference to a war on Christmas appeared in an article in Henry Ford's The International Jew, the World's Foremost Problem, a collection of anti-Semitic articles published in Ford's personal newspaper, the Dearborn Independent, in the early 1920s. Ford's editorial staff warned that, quote, "The Jew considers any public expression of Christian character as being derogatory to his religion." They reported, in a story that might seem familiar to today's Fox News audience, that, quote, "Last Christmas, most people had a hard time finding Christmas cards that indicated in any way that Christmas commemorated someone's birth." Going on to warn, quote, "People sometimes ask why 3 million Jews can control the affairs of 100 million Americans, in the same way that 10 Jewish students can abolish the mention of Christmas and Easter out of schools containing 3,000 children." What on earth was this all about? Was Henry Ford such a dedicated Christian that he was seriously worried that the Jewish minority in America was going to take away his religious liberty to observe Christian holidays? Not hardly. The reality was that he had directly connected the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, an obvious threat to world capitalism, including Ford's own capitalist fortune, to a shadowy Jewish world conspiracy, as have many others for well over a century. This has never made any sense, of course. On the one hand, you have supposedly insanely rich Jewish bankers plotting to control the world in order to secure their permanent wealth. On the other, you insist that these same rich Jewish bankers are behind a workers' revolution aimed at bringing down the wealthy of the world. But common sense has never fueled conspiracy theories. So very early on, Henry Ford became one of the most rabid anti-Semites in America. In 1920, he paid for the publication in America of the infamous forged document called the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, or Wise Elders of Zion, Zion being a biblical reference to Judaism. The document purported to be the Protocols, which means the minutes of a meeting, of a secret conclave of Jewish leaders in Europe in the late 1800s, at which they plotted the takeover of the world to serve Jewish interests and put all other peoples in bondage. The document was absolutely proven in 1919 to have been concocted out of whole cloth by anti-Jewish forces in Europe. But that made no difference to those who wanted it to be a legitimate document, because it served their purposes to use it to stir up hatred against Jews. Those wanting it to be a real document included Henry Ford. In 1919, Ford bought the rights to the Dearborn Independent, a failing newspaper in the Detroit suburb of Dearborn, and revived it as his own publication. He added the subtitle, The Ford International Weekly, and began printing it on a press he had installed in his Ford tractor plant in Dearborn. This newspaper was distributed to every Ford worker in his factories, and every Ford new car dealership was required to religiously distribute the newspaper to every customer and potential customer who came through the doors of their display room. By 1925, it had a circulation of 900,000, putting it in second place in the nation among newspapers, second only to the New York Daily News. With his captive audience added to his personal worldwide reputation as a great businessman, Ford was able to spread his own idiosyncratic ideas far and wide and have a strong influence on a significant portion of the American population. By May 1920, the publication was featuring a series of articles under the broad title, The International Jew, the World's Problem, which would eventually be combined all together into a 4-volume set of books by that title. There were ultimately 91 issues of the paper that featured articles on the topic. As you can see, the accusations against American Jews ranged widely, from too much Jew in baseball to the introduction by Jews of the horrible, moronic jazz music that Ford was sure was tearing down American culture. And in the midst of all that, in the March 19th, 1921 edition of the newspaper was the article warning of the Jewish attempt to eliminate Christmas, as well as Easter, from America. In spite of the fact, of course, that Irving Berlin, famous Jewish songwriter, was eventually the author of both Easter Parade and White Christmas. The Jewish conspiracy proposed by Ford, if it existed, was certainly ultimately ineffectual even among Jews. Yes, that 1921 article insisted that the prevalence of Christmas and Easter cards that had no religious theme to them was directly caused by the animosity of Jews toward anything Christian in American society. The rantings included this comment about Christmas cards. Now, all this begins with the designers of the cards. And even in this business, one comes upon that same policy of declaring anti-Semitic everything that is Christmas. I'm guessing that many readers of Ford's paper, just like watchers of Fox News's War on Christmas coverage, just accepted the accusation. But just like the 21st century has humorous pushback against the War on Christmas nonsense from a group of late-night comedians, turns out that there were a number of groups pushing back against the Dearborn Independent back then too, like these folks. It is amazing what you can find online on the internet these days. In a Google search for information on Ford's Dearborn Independent newspaper, I discovered a digitized version of a bound collection of 1921 modern stationer magazines aimed at the publishing industry of that exact same time frame. Stationers were the businesses that, among other things, printed and distributed greeting cards. Here's the cover of their May 10th issue that year. On page 22 of that issue was this article titled, "Religious Greeting Cards. Henry Ford's newspaper gives ridiculous reason for their lack. Dealers find demand for them is growing." Ordinarily, demand is supposed to regulate supply, but there may be circumstances under which producers are unable to take care of a certain demand. These circumstances would include economic reasons, an inability to produce, and a demand itself of such small proportions as to make it inadvisable that it be catered to. In a recent issue of the Modern Stationer and Bookseller was published an article giving a number of letters from greeting card publishers in reply to one from a priest asking why the religious motive was not given more prominence in Christmas and Easter cards. The priest recited that it was impossible for him or his friends to buy greeting cards for Christmas in which the true meaning of the day was emphasized, and he asked the publishers why no religious cards could be had by those inclined to buy them. In replying, the answers of the publishers were almost unanimous in saying, "There is no demand for religious cards." Several cited unfortunate instances of trying to market a line of religious cards for Christmas. In an odd coincidence, the issue of their own magazine that is here referred to was published the same exact week as Ford's article, March 1921. The subject has aroused considerable interest and not a little discussion concerning the possible demand for greeting cards, but a rather humorous light, to say nothing of a decided coincidence, is thrown on the matter by the fact that in the same week that the Modern Stationer and Bookseller published the article, Henry Ford's Ford Dearborn Independent, in its usual anti-Semitic article, made the remarkable suggestion that greeting cards embodying the spirit of the Christian Christmas are not offered for sale because the greeting card industry is controlled by those of the Jewish faith. You might say the writers of this magazine were a bit like the Stephen Colbert and Jon Stewart and Trevor Noah of their time. They poked fun at the ridiculous nature of Ford's accusation in their article, and they undermined it by providing specific information from their own files, including this letter to the Modern Stationer editor from a greeting card publishing company about the issue of producing cards with specific religious themes. Reverend Sir, we have been in the card publishing business but a few years, and when we started, we naturally assumed that a large percentage of the population would be interested in a religious card expressive of the Easter and Christmas seasons. But after 5 years in the business, we find this is not the case. Except in a few instances, most people prefer to send a cheerful card rather than a religious one. Our entire organization is made up of Christians, about 1/3 Roman Catholic, and we give our employees all the cards they require. And it is interesting to note that not even the Catholics selected religious cards. We published a series of 4 religious subjects 4 years ago, and at the same time published 2 humorous Christmas subjects. Of the religious cards we printed, the smallest possible quantity, 10,000 of each, and we still have quite a number of the 40,000 to dispose of. And during that time, we have sold over 1/2 million of the 2 humorous subjects. You can readily understand that we are in business for only one purpose, and consequently, there is no incentive to continue publishing cards of a religious nature. No, in spite of Henry Ford's insistence that it was Jews who were trying to suppress religious cards, it was actually just the reality that back in that supposedly more religious era in America, just as now, 100 years later, people already preferred cheerful, goofy, and sometimes downright in-your-face cards for the holidays, like these. Yes, already back then, many folks joked regularly about the fact that their bank accounts were depleted every year by the orgy of Christmas present buying, an idea represented in some cheeky Christmas cards like these 2, showing Santa himself as a hold-up man. As he says in the one on the left, "The December 25th, if you remember, comes but once a year, so smother your curses, hand over your purses, and don't try to interfere." Although Santa wasn't always holding people up, sometimes he was just being held up, in the sky, not by reindeer in a sleigh, but by the latest newfangled flying machines. Dainty, gentle cards featuring babies and children were popular for Christmas. And just as today on the internet, cats and kittens were a very popular theme. As were cheerful wildlife cards, and not so cheerful wildlife cards. There were risque greeting cards and Christmas magazine covers, some of them a lot more risque than these. And a whole lot of just plain weird cards. The Dearborn Independent was right. There were very few religious cards available. But it is abundantly obvious it had nothing to do with Jews having control of the greeting card industry. It had to do with a society which had long been highly secularized, in spite of what modern Christians and Fox News would like to pretend. So just what was Ford's unspoken agenda, with the rants about Jews trying to undermine observance of Christmas in America? Here's more from the 2015 Counterpunch article. Ford's conspiratorial rants were more than crude anti-Semitism. They were part of a broader politics that he actively tried to inculcate in his workers who were given copies of the Dearborn Independent as a condition of employment. Latching on to current trends in racism, Ford turned Jews into a boogeyman designed to garner greater compliance among his workforce. In Ford's editorials, workers who sought a better life through union organizing, or who dared to dream of alternatives to capitalism, were merely the dupes of diabolical Jews who sought to destroy the world by controlling the labor movement and promoting communism. A pro-capitalist, anti-labor, Protestant Christianity served as a bulwark against the Jewish Bolshevik plot to destroy America and create a one-world government. Thus, Ford warned of Jewish efforts to secularize public schools in order to prepare the soil for the teaching of Jewish revolutionary ideas by red professors at the college level. The worldview that Ford created was entirely self-serving, framing the unions that he struggled against in order to maximize his personal profit as part of a shadowy Jewish conspiracy. When workers at his Rouge River plant in 1939 threatened to unionize, he had signs posted reading, "Jews teach communism, Jews teach atheism, Jews destroy Christianity, Jews control the press, Jews produce filthy movies, Jews control money." So concerns about a concerted war on Christmas from nefarious sources wanting to destroy religion in America didn't start with Bill O'Reilly and Fox News. But it didn't jump directly from Henry Ford's rants in the early 20th century to the screens of Fox News in the early 21st century either. The attempt by American capitalists to fire up Christian Americans over the issue of Christmas observance simmered under the surface for several decades after Ford, until they found just the right time to bring it out in the open again. The unprecedented labor activism that brought about the New Deal terrified the business community. In 1947, National Association of Manufacturers President H.W. Prentice warned of the ominous rise of class consciousness engendered by legalized labor union activity. Luckily for business, the Cold War, with its anti-communist fervor and red baiting, brought the full power of the state to bear on the American left. With this new realignment of class forces, right-wing ideology again became ascendant. Church leaders fought to put Christian identity at the forefront of the struggle against communism. Reverend Billy Graham warned that communism is masterminded by Satan. The Christian Freedom Foundation was created in 1950 with generous covert funding from Sun Oil to halt creeping socialism, state socialism, government-controlled agriculture, government subsidies for schools, price and wage fixing, and all other steps towards collectivism. The American Council of Christian Laymen and the Spiritual Mobilization, Protestant organizations secretly funded by the business community, red-baited clergy that supported the New Deal, with publications like "How Red is the Federal Council of Churches?" Earlier episodes of this Strange Brew series have covered some of the buildup of this movement, which led directly to the Religion in American Life program that swept the country in the mid-1950s with its billboards, radio programs, and much more. All of this set the stage for the rise of the John Birch Society, founded in December 1958 by Robert Welch. In this heightened atmosphere, the John Birch Society, an activist organization which sought to move the Republican Party to the right, stepped in. Picking up on many of the themes espoused by Ford, the John Birch Society argued that the United States was being moved towards socialism as part of a plot to create a one-world government. In 1959, they issued the pamphlet, "There Goes Christmas," a warning about the Reds' efforts to weaken the pillar of religion in our country by driving to take Christ out of Christmas, to denude the event of its religious meaning. The Birchers' war on Christmas followed the same pattern as Ford's, with one significant change. In the post-Holocaust world, anti-Semitism became a poison pill, inviting comparison with the recently defeated Nazi regime. Birchers replaced conspiratorial Jewish bankers with the United Nations, a move that invoked nativist sentiment while quietly invoking racist themes in the mind of the reader. Essentially, they created a dog whistle by wording this idea in a way that invoked racist themes while maintaining plausible deniability on the part of the author. In response to the new Fox obsession with the war on Christmas that had begun in 2004, Salon magazine featured an article in November 2005 on the topic. covering the history of the phenomenon, going back to the efforts of Henry Ford and moving forward. The article, titled How the Secular Humanist Grinch Didn't Steal Christmas, had this to say about the developments during the John Birch Society era. There Goes Christmas, by a Birch Society writer named Hubert Kriegelow, warned, "One of the techniques now being applied by the Reds to weaken the pillar of religion in our country is the drive to take Christ out of Christmas, to denude the event of its religious meaning. The central front in this perfidious assault was American department stores, where the godless UN was scheming to replace religious decorations with internationalist celebrations of universal brotherhood. The UN fanatics launched their assault on Christmas in 1958, but too late to get very far before the holy day was at hand," the pamphlet explained. "They are already busy, however, at this very moment, on efforts to poison the 1959 Christmas season with their high-pressure propaganda. What they now want to put over on the American people is simply this: department stores throughout the country are to utilize UN symbols and emblems as Christmas decorations." According to the John Birch Society, this assault on Yuletide iconography was part of a much broader plan, not only to promote the UN, but to destroy all religious beliefs and customs. The pamphlet called on all Americans to fight back by informing department stores that those with improper ornamentation wouldn't be getting their business. I'm pretty sure I know what the Birch Society author was basing his rant on. There is a digital copy of a 1960 booklet online published by the United Nations that summarized ideas that had been used in the period 1956 to 1959 across the U.S. in public schools to educate children about the international role of the UN and how the U.S. fit into its programs. And from my own grade school experiences of those very years, I remember those teaching materials well. I was in the 4th grade in 1956 and specifically remember the lessons about one UN program in particular. In 1946, the newly organized United Nations created the UN Relief Rehabilitation Administration to provide immediate relief to children and mothers affected by World War II. The same year, the UN General Assembly established the United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund, with the acronym UNICEF, to further institutionalize post-war relief work. In 1950, UNICEF's mandate was extended to address the long-term needs of children and women, particularly in developing countries. In 1953, the organization became a permanent part of the United Nations system, and its name was subsequently slightly altered, leaving out the word emergency because it was now a permanent concern. It became simply the United Nations International Children's Fund, but it still retains the original acronym. By the time I heard about UNICEF in 4th grade in 1956, it was particularly well known for one particular program. In 1950, a woman named Mary Emma Allison began the annual Halloween Trick or Treat for UNICEF movement. It quickly caught on all across the country, with classrooms full of kids participating by carrying hand-painted milk cartons along with them as they went trick-or-treating. They used them to collect donations of cash, which they would combine at school the next day to send to UNICEF headquarters. Trick or Treat for UNICEF was the first Kids Helping Kids campaign promoted by UNICEF. The money that is donated goes toward providing children around the world with clean water, nutrition, medicine, and educational resources. This program is still going strong over 70 years later. In addition to the Halloween program, I also definitely remember from the 1950s the UNICEF-themed Christmas cards that came out every year. You'd sell boxes of them and the profits would go to UNICEF to help kids around the world. Varying illustrations on the cards over the years have usually featured doll-like depictions of multicultural children, looking much like they belong on the It's a Small World ride at Disney. That similarity was no accident. The Small World ride was designed originally as an attraction for the 1964 World's Fair in New York, and the attraction, paid for by Pepsi, was offered as a salute to UNICEF and all the world's children. And at Christmas time every year, the outside and inside of the Small World attraction at Disneyland is all decked out for the holidays in general, and Christmas specifically, looking very much like UNICEF Christmas cards. Starting out simple in 1950, by 1960 the Christmas card program had really grown, as described in this 1960 UNICEF magazine. The story of how the greeting cards began is part of UNICEF folklore. The first design was a picture of a maypole painted on glass by a 7-year-old Czechoslovakian girl. Zitka and her classmates were regular drinkers of UNICEF milk, and the paintings they produced were a thank you sent off to UNICEF's bureau in Prague by their teacher. From there, the glass picture of children dancing around the maypole went to Vienna, where one of UNICEF Executive Director Maurice Pate's bright young women, Grace Holmes Barbie, sent out on an information gathering mission, wrapped it up and took it back to New York. In October 1949, small numbers of a card using Zitka's design were produced as a modest fundraiser. The program took off from there, and 70 years later, you can still buy UNICEF cards from all sorts of sources, including Hallmark card shops, Barnes & Noble, and Amazon. Yes, including cards with a religious theme. In addition to Christmas greeting cards, UNICEF also has produced related Christmas decorations and tree ornaments. So, getting back to the John Birch Society rant about Christmas and the United Nations, I actually don't doubt that back in 1959, UNICEF encouraged department stores to use and sell UNICEF Christmas cards, decorations, and tree ornaments, which at that time, just as today, would likely have been objects decorated with illustrations of a peace dove, children from around the world, and words like peace and joy. I'm also sure that they would not have implied that their items should be replacements for standard decorations, since they only produced a limited variety and amount of such decorations, and I'm also certain they had no intention that their decorations be used to drive out representations of the baby Jesus and his mother as symbols of the season, but rather intended them just as advertising for the efforts of UNICEF to do things like feeding starving babies and children and their mothers around the world. What almost everyone else in the land in 1959 no doubt thought was a good works project, a work of charity, very much in line with Christian principles of caring for the poor and needy, was turned on its head by the likes of Robert Welch and the John Birch Society, and accused of being part of a sneaky plot to turn children into atheist followers of a godless one-world government. Not that a very large proportion of American society, including most Christians, paid much attention to the John Birch Society, mind you. As the Salon article mentioned earlier put it, at the time, the campaign to save Christmas was not widely treated as a matter of great national import. The John Birch Society was generally regarded as a crank, far-right outfit whose paranoid conspiracy theories, it believed fluoridated water was part of an evil communist plot to poison America's brains, put it outside the pale of reasonable discourse. Staffers on the ultra-right 1964 Barry Goldwater campaign tried to prevent Birchers from volunteering because they carried the taint of extremism. The John Birch Society didn't have access to a major television network. But a lot has changed since then. Yes, indeed, a lot has changed since 1959, particularly in the last 3.5 years. In the next Strange Brew episode, we will explore the connection between the strange saga of the latest incarnation on the Fox network of the accusations that there is a war on Christmas and the rise of the modern era of John Birch-style internet-fueled conspiracy theories, including the theory that there's not just a war on Christmas, but a war on Christianity itself in the land. And we'll speculate on the effect all of this might have on the 2020 presidential election. As you can see, things have gotten weirder, and you might even say spookier, in the world of American religion in the past few years. There's a reason for that. We'll examine that reason in the next Strange Brew episode. The resurrection of political paranoia.